Hi guys, welcome to my channel. It's J Realms, and today I come bearing the simplest of simple makeup looks. And to discuss one of the... I can't say how simple or difficult it is comparatively to other languages, but I know learning its writing is probably one of the easiest things to do, and that is the language of Korea. I have been studying Korean for 2 years. On and off, so not really learning anything, and then studying it religiously for like 8 months. So I have learned quite a bit more, and I just want to go over the tools that I have used and found very helpful during this entire process. So I'm going to go ahead and start with what is probably the easiest items to get your hands on. When it comes to learning, there are a lot of online resources and communities that you can join that all want to do the same thing, learn the same things, are interested in the same things. This can be with anything, really, but specifically for learning Korean, I found that Amino is pretty helpful because it has a lot of like beginners, some intermediate people. I don't think there's that many like native Korean speakers on there, but I really check in sporadically, but it's still kind of a helpful thing. You know, there's a lot of people who give you resources who will go on there and just put on a post dedicated to certain topics like Korean sentence structure, the difference between honorifics and not honorifics, and when to use them and when not to use them. And it's honestly very nice when you get from someone who is also learning it just like you are, but maybe they're like a little further ahead than you, hopefully. And either way, there are a lot of discussions that go on there in the comments section of those posts. So Amino, I'll be showing the little roll here which specific community it is that I'm on. I'm also on there as JRealm, so I'm pretty easy to find. I don't do many posts because I mostly just need help. Like, I'm not out here helping anyone. The next item that I like to use that has also been extremely helpful is Duolingo. I think Duolingo is one of those apps that is just super common. Like kind of everybody knows about it. Well, everybody who wants to learn a language knows about it. They of course have multiple languages on there. You can learn like Spanish, French, and then in our case, Korean. There are multiple levels to it. Yeah. So it basically just starts with like the alphabet and then numbers and stuff like that. I skipped that because when I started using Duolingo, I already knew those. I knew the alphabet, I knew the numbers, both Korean and Sino-Korean. I knew those. So I didn't need Duolingo to reteach me those things, so I just kind of like tested out of it. And yeah, that's what's awesome about Duolingo. If you feel that you know the lesson well enough, you can choose to try and test yourself. And then you can skip on to the next lesson. And that's just always a cool thing because you can see where you were at. If like maybe you don't pass the test and it's like, no, stay here. That's fine, you know, you just study that same thing. I guess you just don't get it as well as you thought you did. And I've done that a few times where I try to test out of it and Duolingo's like, clearly you don't know this, bitch. And I'm like, that's fair. So yeah, Duolingo, super helpful. Next thing that I'm using, and honestly this one's probably my favorite, but it's the hardest for me to get through. Jenny's Korean class. It's totally free, it's on YouTube, and it's posted by C Mile Korean. Hopefully you can see it like right here if I get the screen recording. If I don't get any of the screen recordings, I'm gonna look like a total dumbass. But anyway, yeah, Jenny's Korean class. I think this is so great. Each one is like maybe 40 minutes long, but it takes me like an hour and a half to get through because of my note-taking style, which I will go over in a bit. I think the thing with like a lot of these the online apps and stuff is you don't really have someone to listen to, like a native Korean to listen to explain to you why things are the way they are. And Jenny, she goes over it very simply, very efficiently. And while obviously there's always like things that can be fixed, but yeah, I think she's done a very well job overall, and she's just super helpful. I'm currently on lesson 12, which is a level 2 lesson 2. Overall, her class is like, I believe 22 videos total. it should be very, I don't want to say easy to get through, because obviously you're still trying to learn. You're not just kind of passively listening to this lady talk about Korean language and stuff. I think it's just very fun. It's very interactive. She gives you little examples, and because she's there, I don't know, it feels like you're actually testing yourself when she tries to test you. But yes, Jenny's Korean class is a wonderful course to take for beginners. She goes over just like how to tell time, how to do the seasons, family members, and then obviously she does go into things like the alphabet, the numbers, and just that basic stuff that most people should know. And then she does, it gets progressively harder, and you can feel that progression very naturally because it's whole video lessons, and most of the time you want to only do one. Just one each day and move on, or one every 2 days and move on, because if you try to do more than one, it's just going to feel like an information overload. Maybe this is just me, maybe I'm just really dumb and slow and I can't handle more than that, but yeah, one video a day is good for me, because it's just a lot of information in one video, and it's all just focused on one topic, so it gets kind of in-depth, but only as in-depth as you need it to be. On to the next one, and this is when we get into things that I paid for in order to learn. I'll go over this book. This is Elementary Korean, the second edition. This is, as you can tell from the Elementary Korean, very much so for beginners. So I feel like a lot of these things, because I have been kind of like relearning them, seeing them multiple times in very different platforms, it's helped me a lot to kind of just get it in my mind that this is what this is. One thing that I like that how Jenny's Korean class goes over is past tense, present tense, and future tense. And she does that very well. It's so easy to understand when I look back at the notes that I took from her classes. It makes perfect sense to me. But when I look at it on here, when I read it on here, it's harder for me to understand. But because I had already kind of seen some of Jenny's lessons, when I read it on here, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. This makes total sense. And I could just write it in a way that would make sense for me again. So, but then when I read this first and then hear Jenny's lesson, it's a little different, where like I'll understand it from here, but it'll take me a little bit longer while I'm taking notes. Maybe it will take me until the end of an entire lesson for it to make sense. This book, it goes like this. You have lesson 1, and then you have sections within that lesson. So if I'm looking at like lesson 1 and I'm studying section 1, section 2, section 3, sometimes section 1 won't make sense to me until I get to like section 3. And that's just how it is, and that's, it's a textbook. It's a textbook. Sometimes you want someone to guide you through it, but there's no one there because you're the only one that's studying this language around you. So I still think this is helpful because it also has little, what are they called? Little exercises for you to complete. And then, of course, the answers are in the back of the book, as one would expect. So you can just run through the exercises, complete them on your own, and then at the end, check if your answers are correct or not. And, that's just, it's always nice to do that stuff. And I guess a lot depends on how you are comfortable learning. Like, I can learn fairly well from reading something. It's not my ideal, but I can learn okay. When someone is telling me things, I will most likely zone out. I need the combination of someone talking and having like a visual representation on there. Because I zone out so much, guys. Like in math class, I would zone out for like 10 minutes, come back and just like look at the problem, copy it down, and be like, I think I got some of that. I'd be okay mostly, but that's how I know. It's just, if the teachers didn't write anything down, I'd be completely lost. But because they're talking and writing things down, it's fine. If they only wrote it down, again, completely lost. I need the combination. Let's go over the flashcards. The flashcards I got mostly from Jenny's Korean class, the textbook, and an app that I used to use called Drops. I don't use it so much anymore because it's mostly just vocabulary, and that's not very helpful. Let me go into that a bit more. I just realized that with Korean, if you just get words, it helps like not at all with any of the sentence structure. I'm sure that if a Japanese person just got a bunch of Korean words, they could make sense of it because their sentence structure is fairly similar. Likewise with Spanish and English, if you get random words, you can mostly formulate a coherent sentence. If you know you only speak English, you get some Spanish words, you can figure it out as long as someone just tells you, you know, the translation and stuff. You can figure it out. With English to Korean, no way. No way. So that's why Drops, which I'll show a little screenshot of what that looks like. Drops isn't one of the ones that I like to use. It's good for random vocabulary. That's about it. I didn't feel like it helped me with sentence structure or with like having an actual understanding of like honorifics or anything like that. It was just no context. So that's when we get into this thing. Now, this book, Essential Korean Phrasebook and Dictionary. I had high hopes for this when I bought this, but then I quickly realized I don't know enough about Korean to use this properly. And so that's why I also bought the textbook, and yeah, that's just how it went. So this one, I feel like it's a little bit better once you have a little bit of context behind the language. One thing that I don't like about this book is that it uses the romanizations all throughout, which I get why. Maybe it's just me, obviously someone who hasn't learned the Korean alphabet and all the sounds it's supposed to make would appreciate the romanization being there. For me, because I already know it, I don't like seeing it. It makes me, because my brain will focus more on the romanization than the Korean words, and I don't like that. I want to focus on the Korean spelling. This is definitely better if you already have some context behind the language, because then obviously you can add a bit more value to the phrases that it's giving you. So now I want to show you guys how I take notes. So I'm going to go ahead and move the camera, and it's going to be focused on my desk and my notebook specifically. Okay guys, so this is the journal that I use for note-taking and just studying Korean in general. It is a rather old journal. I'd say it's about 2 years old now. At first, I was just using it for like basic daily journaling. Let me tell you why I like this journal so much. It is a bullet journal. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with these, you clearly were not around during the lifestyle boom in YouTube back in like 2010 or something. Yeah, when lifestyle YouTubers were super popular on YouTube, these were basically everywhere. They were like the new cool thing to try, and it was for daily journaling. Here we can go back to like what I was writing back at this time when I was doing daily journaling. It was all about aesthetics, much like a lot of the lifestyle YouTubers' entire platforms and entire lives. It's all about aesthetics. So yeah, this is about as aesthetic as I got with it. Everything else was pretty basic. So the reason I like the bullet journal is because it allows you to do so much more than a basic line journal would. I just feel like once you start doing things like this, like little designs and stuff, a line journal starts looking very messy because it does have these very defined lines, whereas a bullet journal is just dots and you can kind of make your own lines. You can draw them on or just let them be like implied. As you can see, my writing isn't too disturbed. It stays pretty straight because implied lines work. So here you can see where I wrote out what I want to complete on this journal with like 2 little bullets empty. You can see when I actually started using this journal. It's been almost a year, guys. But like I said, it wasn't actively studying. I did write down these goals. I did learn the days of the week, but I can only do it with a song. And the song, guys, the song helps so much. It starts with Monday, so it goes 월요일, 화요일, 수요일, 목요일, 금요일, 토요일, 일요일. And you can find it on YouTube. That's where I found it. It helped me figure out the days of the week so fast, whereas before it was taking me a ridiculously long time to figure out. The months are easy because once you know the numbers, you just follow them up with 월, and that's super easy. So it's 일월, 이월, 삼월, 사월, and it just keeps going. So here's Jenny's Korean lesson, and this is basically how, this is where you're going to see a real difference, okay? This is how I used to take the notes on lined paper, right? So I had written these notes on lined paper first and then transferred them over, and I basically kept the format. But here's the thing, it used to look so messy, I couldn't make sense of it, so transferring it over was actually really hard. And this is another thing I love, because this paper is actually very thick. I can use these pens, very pigmented, inky pens. If I was doing it on lined paper, they would just bleed through and it would mess everything up. Even highlighter looked very messy on that thin lined paper. Here's where I'm just going to fast forward to a different lesson. Okay, this is actually from the textbook, so it's not going to... Okay, here we go. This is from Jenny's Korean lesson. It's lesson 8. You can see it. I did draw a line here, but it's not necessary. But you can see that I am doing a bit more. It's a little more organized. It's less of a just lines all the way through and just you know, it's like this correlates to this correlates to this, as opposed to just having to be like, it's all over the place. Really, it does help me focus when I look at it, like I said. Because of the colors, it's so much easier for me to spot what I'm looking for and just kind of make sense of it. The textbook, it looks kind of like lined paper notes, but at least I can like draw the charts that I see in the textbook onto the paper, and it will look neat, it will make sense. Whereas if I was drawing it on lined paper, it would look very blocky, very ugly, like it's taking up more space than it has to. This really has pulled through for me. So basically, like I said, I just use a bunch of these colored pens. They're these little felt tip pens. I love them. And then I also use these Pentel metal tip gel pens. I don't think they count as gel pens. Oh, yeah, liquid gel ink. They're just very nice, very fluid, easy to write with. I also use these Pigma Micron pens. They are technically for art, but like I said, they're just very fluid, very easy to write with. They don't explode, they don't leave random ink blotches or like breakouts sometimes. Like you can see the writing here. It's all very, very nice. Maybe not the writing itself, but the way the ink flows, it's very nice. There's no random breaks in it or anything. And because it comes in so many sizes, I can use it for different things. Yeah, like you can see this writing is thinner than this writing right here, and that is because I just felt like this was going to take up more space, and this just could be more solid and stand on its own. Also, this does allow for nicer titles to be written, so I know exactly what I'm taking notes on. The textbook notes have a very specific format, which is why I can recognize it. They all have this color, and you'll notice that with Jenny's lessons, I never use that color because it is very specific to the textbook notes. So that is why I love my little bullet journal. It is so helpful, it is so functional. If you are going to be taking notes, which I extremely recommend while you're learning a language, definitely get yourself a bullet journal. It is so much easier to understand. And then here's one thing I actually forgot to mention that I also like to do, although this one is for a little bit later in your learning process, and that is I love looking at Korean songs and just kind of translating the lyrics. I never get exactly like a proper translation, but it's always nice to figure out what words I can recognize and, you know, how those translate into a song. While a song is not exactly like casual speaking, it's still nice to know that I can do it. I just feel like I've accomplished a lot in these past 8 months learning Korean, and part of that is because I feel like it's mostly the textbook, Jenny's Korean lessons, Duolingo, and this journal. Anything else that was mentioned, it's very much secondary to those 4 things. And that is all for the video. Thank you so much for being here today, guys. The only reason I was really able to film today is because everybody left the house. And they gave me like a little bit of a warning so I could think of like something to film real quick. And this is what I came up with. Yep, thanks. Bye!